Welcome, everybody. This is a very, very special episode. This is season 2, episode 2, and this is episode 2 with the attorneys. I'm going to introduce you to each attorney one at a time, but I'm very excited to have all of them. All of them represent a different state. If you guys are just tuning in right now, would you please share this? If you're on Facebook, if you're in a Facebook group, on the Facebook pages, or on YouTube, please share this. Join the chat. This is going to be a great conversation between 6. We were going to have 7. Unfortunately, Leslie is unable to be here. She's on a plane. She just won her case. So congratulations, Leslie, for doing good deeds and helping families. But first, I want to bring in my buddy Shawn Kohlmeyer of Washington State. Shawn, welcome to the broadcast. How are you, man?
You know, every day above ground is a good day.
It is true. It is true. It always gives you an opportunity, right?
Yeah. And I have a hearing in my family law case scheduled tomorrow, and who knows what's going to happen. So,
well, we're gonna pray for you for sure. I know I will. It's your personal case, correct?
It is. It is.
Awesome.
Yeah. I haven't seen my son in 2.5 years. And yeah, and they just opposing counsel seems to think that's just perfectly okay.
And the funny thing is too, and I'm going to let you get into talking about you for a few minutes, and just give us an overview of your experience, both professional and personal. But a few of these attorneys on here have gone through or going through family law cases, and your attorneys. So you have been practicing law, which you still can do. You represent other families. You represent other clients. You are apparently a good enough person to be a legal representative or an officer of the court. But many of us, or a few of us, have had our kids taken away. Why you can still do these types of jobs. To me, that's like one of the things, one of many things, and we'll talk about a few, that is like really illogical. If you think about it, you are allowed to represent people in a legal manner, but you're not allowed to be a dad.
Right.
So you'd think if you weren't allowed to be a dad, then probably you shouldn't be allowed to be an attorney, and probably you shouldn't be allowed to walk the streets, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, you know, the guiding principle you've got to remember about the reality of family law, not the way it says it is in the books, is that it's not about the child's best interest. It truly is not. It's truly about creating conflict in order to generate attorney's fees. And once you accept that that's really what's going on, that it's a blood sport between attorneys and satellite professionals, then it's really easy to understand how you can be an upstanding member of society, and then they'll drag you through the family court process. They'll say ridiculous, horrible things about you that have absolutely no evidentiary basis, and you can find yourself in this twilight zone where you haven't seen your kid in 2.5 years, and you're fighting uphill just to be able to get to a hearing. We can talk about the craziness that happened in my case just today, but we can come back to that. So
yeah, I want to give you a couple minutes, and I want to give everybody a couple minutes to introduce themselves. Just give the audience a brief synopsis of who you are professionally, personally, and thank you for coming on. I want to thank all of you guys for coming on. But yeah, give us a little synopsis and a little little snapshot of who you are.
So I came to family law from bike law. I'm a personal injury lawyer in Seattle, and most of my clients are bicyclists who've been run over by cars. And I avoided family law like the plague because it's crazy town. Until I got dragged into it through going through a divorce process with my ex-wife, who hired, in my professional opinion, the most unethical attorney I've ever seen in my life. And by the process of lying and engaging in outrageous unethical behavior, which the courts just repeatedly turned a blind eye to, she was able to achieve astounding results, like the fact that I haven't seen my kid in 2.5 years. Although measured against what she ultimately wanted to accomplish, she's been remarkably unsuccessful. I mean, what they kind of wanted to accomplish was to see me, in jail, disbarred, or dead. And those things haven't happened. But so, and I tell my now new family law clients that's what they go through these high conflict process, and like, that's the way you have to measure these things. So that's who I am. I'm still practicing law today. So I'm still, keeping my head above
Yeah,
water.
you still get to, represent the law and go to work and do everything that you could have more kids, right? If you wanted to, you could be a
Right.
stepdad. You could
Right.
open up a daycare if you wanted to, but you can't see your own son.
Right. And my
Pretty
piece,
ridiculous.
in the shared parenting world is that I've started a website called Unethical Karma, which I'm slowly building over time, where I'm helping to expose what unethical family law attorneys do, and to teach people how to go about filing bar complaints against unethical attorneys to, try and effectuate something different. I mean, I've said this a couple of times in a couple of our interviews, but a couple of times it's been garbled. I mean, I would really love to see that over, say, the next 10 years or so, the number of bar complaints filed against unethical attorneys triple or quintuple, across the country. I mean, if bar associations had to triple their staff just to deal with the number of well-written bar complaints against douchebag lawyers, that I think would have an effect.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Before we bring Connie on, I just want you to answer this question by Danielle, because Danielle wants to know what's the reason you can't see your son? Doesn't there have to be a reason? Go ahead and address that, Shawn, real quick.
Well, thanks, Danielle, for asking that question.
Let's talk about that. That's a pretty good question.
No, you would think that there actually has to be a reason. The short version of the answer to your question is, my residential time with my son was suspended because I got a speeding ticket, which was dismissed for lack of evidence. I made the colossal mistake of agreeing to arbitration. Arbitration is a disaster for families, because the arbitrator, who in my case, I believe, was corrupt, because she's got a long-standing relationship with opposing counsel, whom I also believe is corrupt. And she ultimately got paid $29,000 for the arbitration decision that she issued. Well, the statute in Washington basically allows an arbitrator to decide whatever it is that they want to decide, and there's very, very limited ability of the appellate court to review and reverse that. So the arbitrator in our case issued an order that basically put me under a whole bunch of restrictions to see my kid, almost impossible things to fulfill, but I did them. And because we were in arbitration, there was very limited ability to review. So after I jumped through all of these impossible hoops, which I don't think opposing counsel has ever seen before, then she just, ignored them, and she just continues to create chaos and conflict and distract from that. And the process of dragging that out and just having a constant fight about it is what's, ultimately led to this situation where, I haven't seen my kid in 2.5 years. However, maybe their chickens are coming home to roost tomorrow because we've got a hearing tomorrow, and maybe, it's in front of a new judge, a judge who actually has experience in family law. I mean, there's a lot of things to look for. There's a lot of, that's a large question that she asked. She should buy me a beer. We should.
Let's talk about it. All right, Shawn, we're going to bring in Connie. Connie regularly is from Nashville, Tennessee, right here where I'm staying. I'm actually in Clarksville, Tennessee right now, but I'm moving Connie to Bellevue, so I'll be in the Nashville area soon. Connie, welcome to the broadcast. How are you? And unmute yourself, Connie. You have to unmute. I can unmute you too.
Yeah. Let's do that.
There you are.
You would think after 2 years of COVID and all the Zoom trials I've had, I would be able to figure out when I'm on mute and not on mute. So thank you for reminding me, though. It is getting late. So,
Connie, tell us in a few minutes, feel free to take 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes. Introduce yourself. Give us your history of you, what you are, who you are personally, as a mother, a grandmother, an attorney, and tell everybody who you are.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I won't take too long because we do have a lot of chatterbugs on here. And I think
Yeah.
globally we've got more to talk about than just who we are. And
Oh, sure. I
who
wanted to give you guys the
most people
opportunity.
who see this have probably heard me talk several times, but I am an attorney in Middle Tennessee, and I was a second or third career, basically for me. I was in my family had a very successful restaurant business for quite a while. I went back to law school late. I went to a night school. I struggled through night school. I worked full time while I was in night school. I got through night school. I adopted 3 children as a single mom and became a district attorney, and then was there for about 3 years and went into private practice. And it very quickly, I don't know why, because I always, having been a small business owner, I always thought I would take the direction of small business ultimately. Well, I ended up going from criminal to family, which has nothing to do with business law. But I ended up getting hooked into CPS cases pretty quickly, just because of, I don't know, when you hang out your shingle, karma just brings certain things to you, I guess. And either you're living right or you're living wrong, because it just happens. And then I ended up getting very frustrated with the Department of Children's Services very quickly. I went into, I think there's a certain advantage of being something else before you're a lawyer, because I think you view the world differently. And I certainly viewed the world differently. And I'll just tell you just briefly, here I am, I'm finishing night school, I'm studying for the bar, and our bar group is getting together. And that's right when, oh gosh, what was that TV show that I can't remember? One of the TV shows that was out, that was a big law TV show. And we would watch an episode and you would see these strange things going on, like the attorneys talking to the judge in the back room. And I'm like going, that would never happen. There's rules. People are supposed to follow the rules,
Right.
6 months later. And also this was the year of the O.J. Simpson trial, when I'm getting out of law school and practicing as a DA, and I said, all of that happens and more. And then I said, Marsha Clark is the only person, that can lose a case with DNA. I mean, now I have seen my own county lose a case with DNA, but I thought that was going to be a rarity. So it was a total shockaroo. Everything that I thought would be real is not real. It is total imagination. It is like living in a Harry Potter book that you don't get to read the last 10 pages to figure out what's going to happen. It is ever shifting sand, the things that they do. Well, I have become extremely vocal. I'm a big advocate. I started putting my foot down very early, and I have suffered retaliation multiple times. They would love to bury me and put me under a box of rocks, and so far they've not achieved that. I do have 2 pretty successful Sixth Circuit opinions on civil rights issues. One of them is that the Fourth Amendment applies to social worker, which sounds like a pretty common sense thing, but believe it or not, until 2012, that did not exist. And then the other one is that putting a child in solitary confinement in a detention center is excessive punishment. Again, you would think that would have been established before 2018 with, probably 8 decades of law about solitary confinement for adults, but it had not. So that's, and I'm just battling away. I'm facing a lot of retaliation, just, kind of hanging in there, challenging DCS all the time, trying to change laws. I was at the General Assembly today. So anyway, I'm just plugging along there. And, there are few attorneys that can even talk like this. So
I want to talk, because there's a few of you that are very outspoken, and you're doing your job correctly. And there's retaliation. We're gonna talk about that subject amongst all of you when everybody gets on. But Connie, just asking you directly, what is it? Do you fear losing your job? Do you have a backup plan? Is there a reason? Tell us why you do this, regardless of the consequences.
Well, so I'm really at that stage that they can't hurt me anymore. It really doesn't matter what they do to me. They cannot hurt me. I've worked very hard. I'm very stable. I have a farm. I mean, I can always go live on my farm if I need to. So, I mean, they really can't hurt me anymore. I have some things in my head that I'm going to plan on doing over the next 6 months that's really going to kind of rock the boat even more. It's going to make them really have to shut up or put up or get rid of me or do something. So I'm not willing to talk about that right now. But I just dig my heels in. And here's one of the problems that they've got. I'm very smart. Okay. I am very smart. I'm very tenacious. I'm very persistent. When you challenge me, I'm going to take the challenge. Okay, so I am not going to go, oh no, they want to get, oh, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I can't handle this. No, I'm going to take the challenge. So, that's just the kind of person I am. But, I'm really at the point, I've done that. I had a career. I didn't even start this until I was in my 40s. I've done this for over almost 3 decades now. So, they really can't hurt me anymore.
Well, let's bring in Melissa Isaac from Alabama, who's also a practicing attorney in, I believe, Georgia and Florida, and she can come on and tell me if I'm correct. I should know that. You think I would do my homework and make sure that what I say is correct. Melissa Isaac, welcome to the program. How are you? Oh, I'm going to unmute Melissa. Boom. Melissa, I can't unmute you. You have to do it.
Oh, see, there was a comment right where I muted it. So,
but no, there you are.
Georgia, very close. I'm sorry, Alabama
okay.
and Florida. What am I talking about? Not Georgia, Alabama and Florida. So I practice predominantly in Alabama. The bulk of my cases are here. I do some appellate work in Florida just because of lack of resources at this point. But focus primarily, really focus on representing just fathers in family law cases. And I always feel compelled to say this, and we shouldn't, okay? It's not because mothers don't suffer it as well. It's just because in my experience and statistically speaking, you can't deny that men are the ones who get hit the hardest when it comes to custody and family law cases. It's just irrefutable. So, and just my own experience growing up, had a very vindictive mother, had some difficulties having access to my father. And my mother was very punitive and very just horrific ways towards my siblings and I. And those things wouldn't happen had we had, adequate supervision from my dad or from even, extended family members. So, we think of parental alienation and we think of it's access. You're not having access to one parent. But alienation it just permeates every area of your life. And we talked about this before, Chris, but you think the courts look at it and say, oh, well, the grades are good, attendance is good, this child is flourishing. So obviously these claims of alienation or claims of abuse must not be correct because this child is getting A's and B's. Well, I wasn't even getting A's and B's. I'm lucky to even get out of high school. I'm lucky to be a lawyer, really. I barely met the criteria to even go to law school. But so just alienation's tentacles are so just spread out, and judges aren't educated, lawyers aren't educated, counselors aren't educated, doctors aren't educated. People ask me to describe family court, and I don't know what other word to use other than a shit show, because that's really what it is. So you have these professionals that come in and they're touting their diplomas and they're, you can call me doctor and all this. And then the most worthless of information spews out of their mouth. And then they send these huge bills out to clients. And I mean, it's insane. So you look at, and one thing that I hate about family law, and I know we'll move on, we've got some great lawyers coming on, is that you have this best interest of the child standard that lawyers are not duty bound to act in the best interest of any child. You're duty bound to act in the legal interest of your client, which is rarely what's in the best interest of the child or the best interest of that family. So it would be nice if
Right.
the legal profession would say, you know what, we need to be cognizant and more responsible about how we're leaving this family after this case. So that's really what I would like to see.
Melissa, when you said that they're uneducated, Specifically what? So we have an industry that's pretty much a legal criminal industry that sort of just moves over to this family law thing, right? They basically took these criminal law judges and criminal law attorneys, and they're like, hey, here's some statutes and some laws on families. Let's create this new money making mechanism. That's what and I could be wrong. That's what it looks like they did.
No, you were right.
Let's talk about how much expertise these criminal law attorneys and judges lack when it has to do with, first of all, and Melissa, you and I talked about this on the first episode of season 2, which you guys can go check that out. Family law is a stupid phrase. It's a stupid thing to say. There should be no law for family. The only time that really, and you've spoken of this before, anytime a kid needs to be taken away from parents and stuff like that is more of a legal matter. But we seem to do it really commonplace in this civil environment where a parent doesn't have to have broken a law or ever broken a law, but they can have their kids taken away based on a judge's opinion or their discretion of whether or not they like red hair, or they like that you have a podcast, or whether they like that you speak out against them and exercise your constitutional rights, your First Amendment rights, and we'll get into that as well. But when you say that they're not trained, they're not experts, what are the things that they lack? What is the training that they just don't have? When we talk about family law, what and who are the experts that should be helping us in high conflict custody battles?
So there are a handful of experts, I think, that have a good grasp at what is best for families after divorce or separation. You look like Dr. Richard Warshak. You look at Dr. Warren Farrell. Dr. Mark Roseman. His books are very good on keeping families together. So, the court doesn't grasp the concept that the preservation of relationships should be the goal of family court. That should be the goal, preservation of relationships. And it's not. It's litigating because, dad's a bad dad because he gave the child ice cream at 9:00 at night. And then, God forbid, child went to bed without brushing his teeth. Oh my goodness. My kids do that sometimes. My right. I mean, that's just kind of parenting. Where they say, well, mom's a bad mom because mom listens to rap music in her car. Oh my goodness, take the kids. And so you have this judge on the bench, and we all know this, that the first thing you do when you get a complaint that comes in, you look, number one, who's my judge? Because some judges are 50-50 judges. There's going to be more. Some judges won't touch it. Some judges are very, some judges say, I don't care if this parent does recreational marijuana. I'm not going to punish them for that. And another judge says, one dirty drug test, and you will be on supervised visits if you get to see your kids at all. So justice should not be that you have to look at, say, who's my judge? And then build your case accordingly. So number one, that's not justice. That's bias. That is crafting a case to cater to this judge's bias. That's what that is. You have these counselors that come in, and they puff their chest out. Oh, I'm a counselor. I'm a licensed counselor. They go through this litany of training that they've had, but they cannot tell you what alienation is. Well, what's alienation? I had literally one expert go through all her credentials, and I said, what is your understanding of parental alienation? She tells me on the record, well, if you tell me, I could give you a really good explanation. Oh gosh, you really do have a master's degree, don't you? Master of nothing. But then they come in and they say, well, in my professional opinion, I think the problem here is, dad is very controlling. Dad is very punitive. And they go on this huge conversation as to what is wrong with dad. And I say, I'm so glad that you can explain to the court how you came up with this idea when you've never talked to my client. This is going to be great. I want you to explain the court. You must be so great to have this opinion and never even talk to him. So that's one thing too, is I think lawyers are afraid to really get in there and confront these experts. You don't want to make the expert mad. You don't want to make the GA mad. You don't want to make the judge mad. So a lot of times you go in there and there's a sparse record, or attorneys don't go in there and really make a strong case because they don't want to be labeled a troublemaker. They don't want to make anybody mad. So then at the end of the day, you have a client that ends, they're empty-handed, they're out of money, and they're like, what just happened? So Yeah, I'm a huge critic of GALs, of judges, of lawyers, like you name it. So.
Before we bring on Mark from California, Mark Real Jr. I like how we put that in there, Mark Real Jr. Melissa, are the family courts stealing our kids? Yes or no? Just yes or no?
Oh yeah, it's legalized child.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I liked oh yeah. All right, Mark Real from California, an attorney from California. Let us know who you are. Tell us about yourself. How are you, Mark?
What's going on, Chris? Thank you so much for having me on this panel. I know that I have a fraction of the experience in court that I don't even want to call them my peers that are on here tonight have, but I was someone who I had no idea family court existed. I worked in the sports and fitness industry. For all intents and purposes, I was a baseball scout and then ran gyms. And in 2017, I found myself in family court. And you learn in law school, hey, we're in the United States of America and our court system is fair and they get it right. And I quickly learned that was not the case. And so that's what ended up bringing me to family law. I'm a practicing family law attorney. I'm like Melissa. I represent exclusively men, really all over the state of California at this point. But yeah, it's something that became very personal to me, and you realize that men needed something different, because I went through a handful of attorneys in the beginning of my case and never really got the explanations, never really got the results that I thought should happen. So that's something that I think that the legal community needs, are people that understand that, yeah, there is some inequality, there are some issues with how things are done, and people have to be willing to stand up and fight for that.
Tell us a little bit about your personal experience, why you got into family law. Obviously, you have twins, correct?
Yes, I have 4.5-year-old twins.
Yes, we talked about this. Mark, every attorney that's coming on this panel has been on an episode of We the Parents individually. Melissa was the last one here at the beginning of season 2. So if you guys want to go back to on YouTube or Facebook and check out everybody's interview with myself, they dive into a little bit more about their personal stuff, and every interview is over an hour. So you get to learn a little bit more about each one. So go check those out and share them if you'd like. But Mark, you also work with the Father's Rights Movement. You have your own podcast that's sort of, it's separate, but you work with them, and you go by the Father's Rights Attorney. Why is it that you, just like Melissa, sort of felt like fathers were the ones who needed your voice?
I mean, Melissa said it perfectly. I mean, it's women face these same issues. I literally had a phone call with a woman in Northern California tonight that has spent the last 12 years in court, hasn't seen her youngest is now 18 and hasn't seen any of her kids in 5 years. So this happens on both sides. But for me personally, when I made the decision that, hey, I'm going to go open a practice and I'm going to do this, I knew what fathers go through. I know those feelings, and I know that the dads on here, several of us have had that same feeling. And it's just, it was a connection. It was a passion where women get wronged, but to look at dad in the eye and say, like, we're going to get through this. That was something I could get behind, and I could wake up every morning and do, where I don't know if I'd be as good if just anybody that walked through the door, I took them as a client. So for me, honestly, it was a passion project. I never envisioned being a practicing attorney. I went to law school with no intention of practicing law. And so, to be honest, my desire to practice law outside of helping dads just isn't there. And I don't think that would be fair to anybody to have an advocate that's heart's not all the way in it.
Mark, are the family courts stealing our kids?
Yes.
Okay. I think, I want to ask, I didn't ask Connie and Shawn that. So Shawn, if you want to unmute yourself real quick, you guys can nod too. Connie, Shawn, are they stealing our kids? Yes, they are. Okay. And I'm going to ask really bold-faced question. I have my beliefs on these things, and it's just going to be a yes or no answer. And so far, we're 100% on the yes. Family courts are stealing our kids. So next up, I want to bring on Ben Beveridge. I've never met Ben. at all. But Ben is from Texas. I've seen Ben within the shared parenting movement on social media and all that stuff. Ben is also a fairly new attorney. I'm going to let him talk to you about that. Melissa Isaac, thank you for asking Ben to come on. And Ben, thank you for being here. Let's bring Ben on right now. Hello, Ben. How are you, buddy? You got to unmute yourself. I can't do it.
I'm glad you told me, man. I admit
Ted, don't make me tell you when you come on, buddy.
Thanks for having me. And yeah, thanks to Melissa Isaac for inviting me. I've known Melissa Isaac for several years before I even went to law school. So I really appreciate the invite.
Well, Ben, I mean, tell us your experience, your personal experience. Tell us a little bit about who you are and why you got into family law. And, what is your take on some of the things that these other attorneys from different states have talked about and what's going on in Texas?
Sure. Yeah, I'll kind of keep it short and sweet. My personal story is my daughter's 14. I have twin boys. They're 12. And, I never dealt with parental alienation or like getting denied access to my kids. I just had what they call in Texas a standard possession order, which is, you get your kids' first, third, and fifth weekends every month. And I was just never okay with that, never sat well with me. And I never got used to it. I never just kind of, accepted it. And it caused conflict between me and my ex. It's like whenever we get in a fight, sometimes I get the kids extra and then we get in a fight and it's like, okay, you're going by the papers now. And that just drove me nuts, And then I got hooked up with the Father's Rights movement. I got really involved there. I got really involved in the legislative sessions in Texas, trying to pass equal parenting bills. And then I decided, I'm going to keep fighting and litigating until I get equal access to my kids. I'll do it until they age out. And so I know people that have spent well over $100,000 trying to do that. So I thought, I'm just going to go to law school and that'll be cheaper. And, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, well, I can help other people and I'll have a new skill set. And so that's what I did. I went to law school in my last year. I filed suit in my personal case. Like within, I think it was a month or two after I got licensed, my case settled. I got 50-50, with my kids. That was the end goal. And then I set up shop. I should say I got 50-50 through mediation. I had this awesome mediator who, it just worked out great with her. We had one mediator and he kept telling me the judge is not going to order 50-50. So like he wouldn't take it to the other side, and I'm like, look, man, I'm paying you, at least take it to the other side. And he wasn't pushing it. My second mediator believed in 50-50, believed it's a tool to settle cases. She pushed it. We settled, it was done. And so I got out of law school. I opened my own practice and I was practiced about a year ago. And it was really tough because I'm a solo practitioner. I was working from my home and you got COVID going on. So, I wasn't going to a courthouse. I was really isolated. It was really rough. So I actually recently joined with a law firm and it was with the mediator that settled my case, and kind of, we have an understanding of what kind of cases I'm going to be working on and which cases I don't want to. And, but yeah, as far as everything everyone else has said, it's just as true in Texas, courts and attorneys, they just don't understand that 50-50 is best for kids. You can just use that to settle cases quickly, and if you start with that, if you start with that as a presumption, you're going to take a lot of fight. There's not even going to be much of a fight, because no one feels like the inferior parent, and they're not. And so I'm really involved in the legislative session trying to pass equal parenting here in Texas because the courts and the attorneys, they're just not with it,
Ben, you have a couple things. You have 3 gubernatorial, is it goob? gubernatorial, whatever. You have 3 candidates running for governor in Texas that shared parenting is high on their list of I guess first 60-day. We're gonna hit this hard. Go ahead and mention those names because honestly, I think I only remember one. But I've been following Texas. Texas is getting ready to be the next one. I think Texas is talking about shared parenting pretty hard. So tell us who those 3 candidates are and what's going on with shared parenting as far as legislation goes.
Well, I honestly can't tell you their names since I've, kind of started practicing in the past year. My head is just surrounded by cases, and I haven't been doing as much activism as I was before. But one of them is Alan West. And there's another gentleman. He's a real country guy. I don't remember his name, but
I'm going to look it up right here. So I'm going to take the
Rather. I think it's Rather. I don't remember the third guy's name, but our current governor, he used to be the Office of the Attorney General. And, the Office of the Attorney General, they're responsible for about 50% of the possession orders in Texas. And all of those give children the minimum amount of access to their non-custodial parent. Like there's no way you're going to get 50-50 or any more than the bare minimum. So our governor is probably responsible for more single parent households in Texas than all the courts combined, and we're not going to get a equal parenting bill by him.
So like you said, we had Alan West, we have Huffines, right? Huffines. And there's the other gentleman, I'm looking for his name. And we also have, and coming up, I think it's next week, I believe, I have Jeff Younger, who's also in Texas. Jeff Younger is going to be a guest on this show, and Jeff is opening up a whole new box when it comes to parental rights and transgender, and, can the state interfere? Can schools interfere? Can the other parent interfere with the abuse of our children and changing their genders at such a young age. And so we're gonna talk about that next week. But I want to bring on Ted Bush, everybody. Ted is from Illinois. That way we get all our attorneys on here. Ted, you got to unmute yourself. You already did, Ted. How are you, Ted Bush?
I'm doing wonderful. Nice to see you, Chris.
We the Parents. Yeah, man, you've been on our show. You're an alumni. You've been on this show. You've been around since this show started. So there's multiple episodes you can see Ted on. And one of the main cases that Ted has worked on, besides his own, and I'm going to let you briefly talk about your own as well, including some of the personal stuff and personal history and background of yourself, but Cash Jackson's case. And, briefly just talk about Cash and then obviously talk about yourself, where you're from. Obviously you have a couple kids yourself. You've gone through the family law process. You've gone from a certain area of law to family law. And you're out there helping other families for either free or for a discount or for a pay me later. And you are one of the best men I know. You're dealing with some personal medical issues as well. And you're still getting up every day and kicking ass and taking names. So thank you, Ted. And I'm going to shut up and let you talk to everybody about you.
Well, there's nothing I would rather do right now than this. It's not something that I wanted to get into, something that I sort of fell into. The reason why I started taking cases is I got inspired by Brian Ludmer, who is the legal secretary of the American Psychological Association's Parental Alienation Study Group. And he's out in Ontario, Canada. He's one of the best parental alienation attorneys in the world. And he just spent like 6 hours helping me write up a timeline. That was one of the things he advised me to do, is to write up a timeline of my entire case. And I was so blown away that he spent so much time on me that I sort of felt like I had an obligation to repay it. And so it wasn't hard to find Cash. If anyone knows Cash Jackson, Cash was all over the internet. Cash was in Illinois, and I watched him run for governor. I watched him on the debate at my girlfriend's house, and I couldn't believe how much courage he had. He was taking child support questions, really sensitive questions that nobody would have the guts to go into a national, state media and face that with two other governors sitting on the stage with you. So that's one case that I took back in 2019, and people that have followed it have seen the twists and turns, and including some unfortunate recent ones. So yeah, I mean, that's how I got involved in this, is that I was shell shocked at how broken and corrupt Cook County, Illinois domestic relations courts were. I couldn't believe it. It's like it couldn't make this up. And so I had experienced it, and I wanted to, I had some ideas of how to deal with these matters, sort of unconventional wisdom, if you will. And I wanted to try some of that. And, I like flamboyant clients because they allow me to be flamboyant myself, or at least to go outside the box. So
yeah,
that's sort of, I started taking cases in 2019, and I grew to about 12. Now I have cancer. That sort of put a little bit of a wrench in it, but I'm still trying to be as loud and obnoxious as possible.
That man, I admire, and we've talked on the phone privately before, and like the amount of strength, and I'm sure you have your weak moments that not everybody sees and stuff, but you're out there, you're pushing, you're caring about other people, and you have the weight of the world on your shoulders personally. And so I just want to say thank you for being just a good GD person, even though you could so bow out and stop worrying about everybody else's problems. You don't do that. And so that's very commendable. So thank you, Ted. So tell us, Ted, a little bit.
I've been hit. I have, my caseload has been hit pretty hard. I haven't been able to do what I used to, as you can imagine.
Oh yeah, I mean, absolutely, and nobody expects you to. And you were taking on a big load as far as cases goes. Just trying to help people. Like, once I think you went through your own stuff, and you can talk briefly about that if you want to mention some of that too. And then took on Cash's case. You just started reaching out to people. People were reaching out to you, and you were taking them on, and you were practicing a form of law that you really didn't know. And I can tell you what, you know more than most of them.
Well, I don't know about that, Chris, but I want to follow a little bit on what Connie said in her segment. I spent 15 years in Washington, D.C., and I got to know some of the high-powered attorneys, and the attorneys that billed $600 to $1,000 an hour in D.C. were the ones that were the lawyer lobbyists. Okay, so the people that practiced law but also had the ability to change it and influence it. That's where the real money is made. And so I'd experienced that, I've witnessed that, and I've participated in it. I wasn't a lawyer when I was in D.C. I got my law degree after. But it seems that in a way, the two should go together without much difficulty. And so I used to lobby Congress. I used to work in Congress for 5 years. I have a history of trying to tell people in power that they need to do something before it's too late. And back in 2006, 2007, we were trying to tell the Senate Banking Committee and the House Financial Services Committee, Dodd-Frank. We all know who Dodd-Frank is now, but we were trying to tell them that if they didn't do something about the loss of manufacturing jobs, we're going to have a financial crisis. And guess what? We had a financial crisis. So that's just one example. So, what I saw here is a system that's unsustainable, that's about to crash and burn. And the people in power, if they have any brains, would make sure that there's a gentle fall, a soft landing, instead of a crash. And these people seem just to desperately want to crash.
Well, I don't know. And I just want to ask the other attorneys that are on right now. Ted was coming in a little choppy, so sometimes that doesn't show on the feed, and sometimes it just shows in front of us. But the live stream is fine. So I just want to make sure that everything that Ted just said was heard. Did you guys hear all that?
Yep.
Okay. All right. It might just be me then. It might just be me on my end as the administrator here. But so, Ted, tell us a little bit about, if you want to, your personal case and what you've had to deal with. Take a few minutes and talk about when's the last time you've seen your kids, how long have you been fighting your own battle, and what's going on today.
So my kids came over on Saturday. They're not alienated from me. My case was never an alienation case. It was a gatekeeping case. Gatekeeping is sort of the step before alienation. My ex-wife just happens to be a really bad alienator. She's not very good at it. Doesn't mean that she could possibly get better at it later. She sort of has a traditional Mexican cultural element, but also I think some psychological issues. It's, keep the kids away from dad, keep the kids away from dad. She actually, when we were going this around after I got diagnosed with cancer in August, she literally told the judge that, I don't have a problem with him seeing kids. Just he can see the kids when he gets better. Well, there aren't a whole lot of people that survive stage 4 pancreatic cancer. So I was like, thanks, sweetheart. That was really, thanks for the thought. But that's the kind of stuff that I was dealing with. To boil down my case that's gone 4.5 years. That's really the dynamics that's been going on with her. But what she's done, she's fed all the attorneys and the cottage industry surrounding, making them all fabulously happy and wealthy. Spinning wheels, doing nothing. But the one thing, I had this judge who I appealed, got his order, his judge overturned the state appellate court, and he ignored the appellate court opinion as if it never happened. He never held the final hearing on parenting time that it was ordered to. And then one occasion, this judge, his name is Judge Carr, is no longer on the bench. Due to medical issues, what we understand. I had something that Connie could appreciate. My ex-wife had the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services come to my home, and they came into my house and they broke the law. They broke a federal settlement agreement and tried to get me to agree to get my kid with admittedly no grounds to take protective custody. I kicked them out of my house. Okay, this was all recorded on police video. And so then when we went to order protection hearing on November 30th, 2018, Judge Carr told me, he's like, I'm telling him, he's like, you can't hold this against me, that I ejected these people. They were breaking federal law. He said, well, if you think that DFS is violating the rules, go take it up to DCFS. Meaning that the judiciary will have no role in police, the Illinois Department of Family Services. So what Judge Carr didn't realize is that Illinois DCFS Inspector General doesn't investigate until a federal lawsuit is filed. It's like, all right, he just invited me to file a federal lawsuit. So I filed a federal lawsuit and ended up to the circuit. Now, thanks to Judge Carr and my son Julian, who was the lead plaintiff, the federal courts and the Seventh Circuit now acknowledge they have federal subject matter jurisdiction over domestic relations cases. So thanks, Judge Carr.
So you have stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Your ex is denying that you may or may not have it. She stated that in court. I watched the video.
Yeah,
the court's reaction to that statement. I was like, wow, you just said that.
Yeah, the hearing should have been over.
Are the courts? I'm going to ask you this question, and I'm going to ask the other question. I got to ask Ben too. Ben, just by show of thumbs up, are the family courts stealing our kids?
Yeah, they are, and I think you could also say they're stealing kids' parents.
Yeah. Ted, are they stealing our children?
Oh, Chris, I'm going to duck this one. Everyone else answered it, and I'm going to duck it. Of course they are. It's child trafficking. It's racketeering by attorneys in the judiciary, and they're taking children from fit parents and selling them back at the highest price with unneeded and unwanted service.
Right.
Well, and I just want to add to that,
Ted,
they've
go ahead.
really made an industry of selling children. So it's not just that they're selling children, it's they've created a whole industry to accomplish it. And that kind of fits in with what everybody has said here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Connie, you mentioned that, and I'll direct this towards Ted. Ted, is this on purpose? Did it evolve into this? And was it well intended at the beginning, or was it always this nasty intended industry of child trafficking?
Well, I think there's two elements to it. Okay, well, one part of it has to do with the people. In Illinois, you can just take it to the bank that there's corrupt involved, and that these people have realized that there's a big money train. There's no question that that's going on in Illinois. But I think that, and Connie is probably a better source for this, that it really started with the best interest of the child standard in the 70s. It was actually Hillary Clinton who wrote in the Harvard Law Review that the best interest of the child standard is indefinite and provides no legal framework at all. And what it has done is led to an explosion of social services agencies, bigger government, where the government has come in. It's out of control in Illinois, where the government's coming in and inserting its own viewpoint that even the parties may not even share. So the best interest of the child standard has basically grown into the nanny state. I call it the nanny police state. That's what I think it really has evolved into, just by a combination of greed and ideology.
Ted, Connie, so I don't know if, Connie, if this was your comment before that you're asking if you need Ted's opinion on, but Connie, you can go ahead and unmute yourself, and you and Ted can chat for a second about what you're asking.
Oh yeah, I just want the court opinion that you were just talking about your case. I would like to be able to take a look at that. But let me say something about family law. So I started doing family law in 1997. So, I've got a good couple decades here plus, behind me. And it was different back in 1997. And so, I mean, you had standard visitation and you had the old child support guidelines. So first of all, you walked into court. If you represented the man, you pretty much told him, unless she's dragging your kids around by the hair and she's drinking every night, here's what you're going to get. I mean, it was in the judge's rule book. I mean, in chamber rules, they had a standard visitation order. So that's pretty much what you did. It was just a done deal. So it was dad speaking up, number one, that really started just the shift in a narrative. And that's why I tell everybody, and this was before social media, that's why I tell everybody, speak up, speak up, speak up, because we have to keep the narrative going up. And so that came up. And then we had the income shares, child support, which started going across the nation, which created another thing just for attorneys to argue about, pretty much. And then we had VAWA, the Violence Against Women's Act. So you had this series of things that happened from about probably really starting 2000, 2001, 2002, when you started having this vortex of now dads want more time. And then we have to argue about what the incomes are and how we adjust the incomes. Dads and, moms found out that if dads had equal time, they wouldn't get as much child support. All of our tax dollars are going into this child support enforcement. And then we got VAWA thrown in there, and we've got the access and visitation federal money got thrown in there, which anytime you have a federal plan to incentivize something, it's going to become perverted. Okay. It's not going to work. It's going to become perverted. That's why we need much better solutions. So, and then as soon as that chaos started, attorneys would see that they could put a price tag on a divorce when it walked through the door. And I was in Davidson County, which is Nashville, which is a major metropolitan area. I then moved down to Brentwood so that my kids can be in a school system down here. It's a county that is 1/4 the size in population, but it's the 11th wealthiest county in the country. And so I would tell people when they would come in the door, I would tell new clients, they would say, how much is a divorce going to cost? And I would say, look, I can do your divorce for $2,500, $25,000, or $250,000. It's how much you want to fight to decide. And I would tell them, I would say, listen to me. The divorce attorney is the only person in the world who's going to know everything about you. They're going to know everything in your bank account, everything in your retirement, how much equity you have, your credit score, whether you owe anybody any other money, whether or not you have any inheritance coming, and you think they're not going to take advantage of that. So I told them, I said, attorneys in Williamson County put a price tag on your head when you walk in the door. And I know, I mean, there are attorneys who had a reputation of driving a case up to $100,000 in attorney's fees and then settling the case. And I would tell my clients right up front, and depending on who the other side hired, because I said, it depends on who they hire as an attorney. And if they hire an attorney that I know is a reasonable attorney, and while Melissa was talking, I was just like thinking, I was like, man, I'd love to be on a case and have Melissa on the other side of me, because we would just like go in there and we'd go like, Judge, can we have a minute? I think we got this settled.
we need a girl talk.
Yeah, we'd be like, give us a minute, we'll be back. And then we'd come in and we'd go like, okay, here it is, blah, blah, blah. So because we'd be so overly prepared, I mean, there'd be like no big secrets, right? And I could just tell from the way she talks and what I know about her practice. But so the chaos of family court. And then I totally agree with Melissa. Judges are not psychologists, okay? No. They don't have a clue as to what best interest of the child means. They have zero clue. And then you throw in these psychologists, which drive me absolutely crazy. They all charge $400 or $500 an hour now. They charge ridiculous fees. They're so easy to cross-examine, but they babble so much that the judge just gets tired of hearing them. So it has become so chaotic that it's like not even interesting anymore, because you know how chaotic it's going to be. So, it really needs to be broken down. And I did my master's program in psychology before I went to law school. So when they started talking about MMPIs and PAIs and the DSM-3 or 4, whatever it was back then, I mean, I already knew what they were talking about, and they couldn't baffle me with psychobabble. And so I was ready to ask them questions. And I've actually had some fun in asking questions now, but I can't say at the end of the day that really helps my client or not, but being that prepared to cross-examine those. So it's an industry. The chaos started 2005 probably is when it just started swirling. There's a price tag on your head, and if they can keep the chaos going, it is job security.
Connie, while you're unmuted, and I'm going to go down and ask everybody this and let them have a minute or two, but Dimitri, and I'm a libertarian, as Melissa mentioned, and one of the things that libertarians know, and probably conservatives as well, is that judicial immunity needs to go. That accountability, not only judicial immunity, absolute immunity, qualified immunity, all immunity needs to go. But of course, we have an issue where everybody's going to sue a judge, or everybody's going to allegate against a police officer, or everybody's going to do this and that. So we do have to address that. We need to come up with a solution as an alternative to removing immunity. But do we need to get rid of absolute immunity for judges? Do we need to be able to hold them accountable a little bit better?
Well, it probably needs to be a little bit better defined. But I do want to say, somebody talked about bar complaints, and there needs to be more bar complaints. I think that was Shawn that said that. But I disagree with that a little bit, because because the problem is, and this is what I've had to deal with, and we talked about this a little bit before we went on the show, attorneys who buck the system and challenge the system. Anybody in domestic law is going to get a complaint filed on them. There's always clients who are upset, whatever, and they file those complaints on them. But attorneys who buck the system's going to buck back. And the bar complaints process is the one way they can buck back against you. And because in part, the ethical rules are so vague. Like if you interfere with the administration of justice, like they're trying to come after me on me being aggressive in discovery, legitimately using all the rules that are available to me. And now they're saying I was too aggressive and I interfered with the administration of justice. So our false and misrepresentation. I mean, they can take the ethical rules that we currently have and just butcher them up to be able to retaliate. So I think if we're going to have, because I have filed complaints and I've had, people file complaints on attorneys. And if it's an attorney who doesn't buck the system, they won't do anything. They just won't do anything. Right. So the same thing with judges. One of the things that I've been very proactive in since 2008 is a judicial accountability system. And I don't know that it's the immunity, but I think the judicial accountability program, and in the Tennessee Constitution under Article 6, you don't have to impeach a judge. You can remove a judge, and you remove a judge with a petition that goes before both houses. And with a 2/3, you can give the judge 10 days notice. And on a 2/3 vote, you can take a judge off the bench. And I have gone down to our General Assembly a multitude of times. And I said, you need to hold judges accountable. You are the chiefs in control, because a judge can control everything about your life. They can take your property. They can take your children. They can take your freedom. They can take every dime that you owe. They can shut you up and gag you. They can take your speech. So we need accountability, I think, from the judicial accountability between the legislature and the judicial accountability aspect.
Shawn, do you think that we need to get rid of judicial immunity? Do you think we need to get rid of judicial discretion? Do you think that's sort of been one of the main elements that's made this pretty rogue, where parents are having, it seems like discretion is violating the law.
Okay. You've asked three or four questions.
Deep breath. I know. I got ADHD or something like that.
You're good at that. You're good at that. Yeah. I don't think that the concept of immunity is necessarily really a bad idea in some circumstances. And of course that concept is ancient, right? It comes from sovereign immunity. I think the problem with immunity issues is not that we say that judges should be immune because they are the third branch of government and they are doing governmental functions. It's that when they're engaged in dishonest behavior, that they still have a immunity shield on that. And I think that's probably where the line should probably be. If you take a look at what's happening right now in St. Louis, the St. Louis family court system, is in chaos because an immigration attorney who you should probably invite to your show, Evita Turi, was ground through the process as well. And it looks like she exposed a corrupt GAL in that process. And she ultimately brought suit against her and a bunch of other people who were involved. And she exposed a history of this GAL lying, this GAL fabricating evidence, this GAL, doing, a whole bunch of just flat out dishonest things. And the Missouri Supreme Court, or the Missouri Appellate Court, just dismissed her lawsuit on an immunity basis. And her response to that was basically saying that, there is no law, there is no rule that allows one of these court appointed professionals to engage in dishonesty. And that when they do engage in dishonesty, that's where the line should be. And, that's where they should lose their immunity. I mean, I think that, I think it was Ted who talked about at one point in time, and I could be wrong, about saying that if we just wipe out immunity completely, that, there would be just an avalanche of of frivolous lawsuits, by every disaffected person that comes along. I think that's probably correct. And, our courts are already, overburdened, but we do need to have some sort of line in which you can get some enforcement on that. But I would like to respond to one thing.
Yeah.
Or two things, actually. So, Connie's point about, how bar complaints can be used against lawyers, she's absolutely right. If you're a lawyer parent in the process, and you've got, one of these unethical attorneys on the other side, you can expect that you're going to get a bar complaint against you. That's absolutely true. And it's going to be a nightmare in your life. But I disagree on the idea that that I think we need more accountability for the sorts of high conflict lawyers that we see out there. And I also think that it's long past time for family law lawyers to have a special set of ethical rules that apply to them, like prosecutors have a special set of ethical rules that apply to them. So, if they did, right, if, say, for instance, we had ethical rules that said that, when there is a child involved, that the interests of the person that you are representing, your advocacy issues, and most people don't know that the word zealous advocacy is now gone. It's now acceptable advocacy. Your advocacy duties need to be balanced against what is in the best interest of the child in preserving relationships with the opposing parent, with their extended family members, right? That you need to have the same sorts of duties of truth telling that prosecutors have to criminal defense attorneys. We absolutely are going to need to take a look at this, from an ethical point of view and say, that the attorneys that behave unethically, and they make a common practice of it, and I could name 3 of them, in Seattle off the top of my head right now, that those people who are doing that are creating probably 90% of the problem, and they're creating this giant mess for everybody else. And we need to rein them in. And one of the ways that we rein them in is to hold them accountable to the ethical rules that they don't comply with. Let me give one little last example of that.
Yeah.
So, an attorney lying in their pleadings or in the courtroom, that is clearly, flat out, absolutely unethical. It violates RPC 3.3. When they don't correct a false statement that they've already made, and they've been alerted to it, it violates RPC 3.3C. There are no less than 3 ethical rules that prohibit an attorney from lying. I am not allowed to lie. And yet the fact that, I bet every attorney here on this panel would say, they know multiple occasions in which opposing counsel has flat out absolutely lied, and they've gotten away with it, and there have been absolutely no consequences to it. If those bastards were held accountable and they were admonished or sanctioned in some way, and just go up the list of discipline held against them, there would be a very quick restructuring of the way these attorneys would behave. And unfortunately, it's not happening yet, but it's not going to happen unless more people advocate for it. And that's kind of what my point is.
Melissa, I want to ask you, we're going to kind of shift over to talking about child support. And the reason I want to ask you about child support is because the majority of parents paying child support are men. And you are an advocate specifically for men as well. And you are a mother. And I want to know not only your professional opinion, but your personal opinion on how the child support system should work. And I want to give that to you specifically.
Well, first of all, in a system that should be, for the most part, a shared custody system, child support should be an afterthought. And child support is the first thing. There's an uncontested divorce. Largely, we can submit everything to the court. The judges sign off on everything. People don't even step in the courtroom generally. But there's a couple judges that will not sign off on an uncontested divorce if you deviate from the child support guidelines. And of course, because then the state doesn't get their money, I'm assuming. But child support
Mm.
is really at the forefront of a lot of domestic relations judges' minds. They're just, I guess, indoctrinated. And to say, you can go into court and you could say, Judge, my client hasn't seen his children in 6 months. Mother's withheld visitation for 6 months. And then all of a sudden it becomes about, yeah, but he didn't pay child support for 1 month. Oh, wait a minute. He didn't pay child support? Do you not think your children have to be supported? And everything becomes about child support. So child support, it is its own industry. It's its own
Mhm.
industry. People make so much money off of child support contracts. There's a lot of YouTube videos about the experts talking about how grossly overrated the child support is, how it's free money to the recipient parent. It's not taxed.
Right.
There's no tax deduction by the payor. So it's like Connie was saying, it's an industry, it's a business. It has nothing to do with how much a child needs to be supported. And if you have had a client come in today, we got 50-50 last year of a baby, which is really hard to do for a dad.
Mm.
And mom's over there, lying to he has proof now that she lied to the court regarding her income, regarding daycare expenses and all that. So you have to go back and litigate that. But one hard thing about the child support is, as long as it's being paid, the courts kind of, when child support gets worked out, let me say this, moms generally won't really talk about custody until they can get the child support straight. I can't tell you how many clients I've had that said, listen, all right, in mediation, all right, tell her I'll pay full child support if I can get 50-50. They're buying these 50-50s from their kids. So, but moms want to start there. They want to start the issue of child support before they'll talk about the issue of custody. Because if you go
Mhm.
approach 50-50, there may not be any child support. Well, wait a minute. How about I'll give you 50-50, but you still pay me child support? So, but child support's a hot button. It's a hot topic. I think,
Yeah.
anytime you bring that up, emotions get raised, because we as Americans have been taught that being a good parent means you pay child support for your dad, right? Being a good parent for your mom means that you get the child support and you raise your children. So I'm not a child support advocate at all.
Mm.
And I want to say one thing, if I could, real quick.
Oh, absolutely.
What
Yeah.
Connie was talking about is, and I guess this factors into child support. We have a family court judge who was removed from the bench, and she was denying most of the petitions from CPS to remove children, because the CPS petitions come in and they say, Judge, we need to take these kids from mom. Mom's acting erratic. Her house is not safe. And she would say, well, how's mom acting erratic? Oh, Judge, she's just erratic. She's doing erratic things. I mean, so the judge was saying, no. So she's denying all these petitions. So all of a sudden, this huge Judicial Inquiry Commission complaint comes down against her. She's removed off the bench. And interesting, Conley, I was talking to her, and I was talking about Title 4D, Title 4B. She really wasn't versed in that. So I sent her all of your videos that you had done, and everything clicked and everything made sense. So, which is great. So now we have a judge here who gets the financial aspect to the decisions that she's making. Oddly enough, a lot of judges aren't really versed in Title 4D, which is what is attached to child support. So, the judges, I think, go to these judicial conferences, and it's hammered in their heads, child support, child support, child support.
Mm.
After divorce, a lot of mothers are relegated to poverty, child support, child support. So it's almost like this redistribution of wealth. It's free money.
Yeah.
So, I think the judicial conferences, I think there needs to be a lot better training when it comes to, other than everything, especially on the issue of child support, child support allocation. And you go to child support court and you have men lined up. I don't care what state you're in. You have men lined up and they have these papers in their hand. None of them can afford attorneys, and it's
Right.
jail, jail, jail.
Yep.
So definitely, I mean, everything needs to be revamped.
Yeah, it's a complete mess. I mean, it totally works against the best interest of anyone, whether it be the kids or the parents. It's totally about profit. At the end of the day, Melissa, in our last interview, like we talked about it, money is the root of all this. The reason all of this is happening is about money. The best interest of the child is a smokescreen, because it's about this. It's just about money. Anyone who's ever been through this, every one of you have talked to people who don't even know how this family court crap works because they have a good family. They've just never had any interference. They've never had an issue. I have a representative that I spoke with, and he's, hopefully helping us make some changes. But he comes from a family that's together, and there's not a lot of divorce, if any. There's no separation, and if there is, it was they worked it out, and they were pretty decent about it. But when I told them that when there's a high conflict situation, I told them that a high conflict parent, well, it only takes one, will go into that system, and in order to get their little breadcrumbs of child support and control, that is what the lawyers, and obviously none of you is when I speak of the lawyers. We're talking about a majority of an industry. Look at that as an opportunity to go, and like you said, you guys talked about, these attorneys know everything about us. We fill out an application. I mean, when I go in there, I've had 4 attorneys, and I've had to fill out where I work, how long I work there, where I live, how much is this, how much I earn, this and that. So they know roughly how much they're going to milk me and or her, and which side they need to lean on the most. Well, my ex doesn't make any money. I make money. So of course this is the the side that we're arguing. Melissa, one of the things I want to ask about child support before I go to Mark, and I want to touch on a few things, and we still got like another 45 minutes or so. And I know Leslie's about to pop on as well. She just flew in from wherever she was doing a case. But Melissa, should child support be based on income, or should it be based on economic costs of raising a child? Should it be about whether you're an NBA star or you're a waitress, or should it be about what does it cost to raise a child, not what do you earn?
Right, without a doubt. What does it cost to raise a child? You have 2 first graders, and they're one dad is a mechanic and one dad is a doctor, and there's an assumption that it costs more to raise the doctor's child. That is complete crap, is what that is.
Right.
So the parents should be able to go in. I mean, and if I'm a mechanic and my husband's a doctor and I'm able to provide for my children, why should I get any money? That it makes no sense at all.
Right.
And well, you better not ask where they're spending that child support, right? It's like the court even takes personal offense. You want the mother to justify where she's spending child support? Yes, I do. But then
Accountability?
It's been it's been asked for, but I don't know if it's different in any other state, but here we can't make the mother explain where this money is going. It's literally free money. But no, it absolutely should be based on the needs of the child. Without a doubt, should be based on the needs. But these guidelines are just completely arbitrary and for the convenience of the court to make money. That's all it is.
Ben, go ahead. You unmuted yourself. You look really excited. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, thank you. As far as child support goes, Texas is like one of 3 states in the country that hasn't gone to an income model shares yet. So shared income model. So when you have kids, only thing they care about for the non-custodial parent is how many kids do you got and how much money do you make. It does not matter how much money the other party makes. The other party can be a doctor. You can be, working at Walmart. You're going to pay them child support. And, in Texas, there's a law, it's a administrative law regarding the Office of the Attorney General that says every 2 to 4 years, they have to have their kind of practices reviewed. And I think like every year they hire, well, I know one year they hired this mental health specialist named Miss Osborne, and these studies come out that say like y'all are doing child support completely wrong. Like there's the average amount, like how much a kid needs. Like we know how much a kid needs. Kids don't need this huge variation of child support. It's kind of accepted practice that this is how much a kid needs. And, the Office of the Attorney General, they take that report every 2 years or whatever and make 0 changes to their policies, and I just, when it comes to child support, I just think it's asinine to force someone to pay child support because they don't have, as much time with their kids, because they're not allowed as much time with their kids for no particularly good reason, but
and another thing, Mark, I'll bring you in on this conversation regarding child support is the other party who's receiving child support. Oh, I got to unmute you, I think. The other party that's receiving child support doesn't even necessarily have to have a job, right? Just the non-custodial parent needs to be employed. And if they set the child support at a certain amount and that puts you in a financial bind, the judge will just tell you to get another job. So you have to work two jobs while the custodial parent doesn't really have to be employed. They won't require them to be employed. Is that correct? Is that fair to say?
Yes and no. I mean, through COVID, that definitely was the case. In California, if someone is willfully unemployed, they can impute income. They'll typically impute minimum wage on them. But I think the big or the big issue we have in child support is the average, we'll just say average man, because vast majority of the time it's the man paying child support, is that, especially here in the state of California, if someone makes $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year and they have a couple kids and they get the every other weekend, they could very easily be paying $2,000 a month in child support. And all of a sudden, you have them living below the poverty line. So I think the biggest thing in reforming child support, and something that should be common sense, is we need guardrails to prevent the payor from ending up in poverty. I'm sure everyone on here gets messages from men on a regular basis of like, I don't know how I'm going to be able to pay rent. I have no money. I have nothing. It takes 6 months to get a child support order in place. They get hit with $12,000 in arrears. They're only seeing $1,500 a month trying to live in Southern California. So the fact that we don't protect these individuals from forcing them into poverty, essentially. And I mean, you could sit here and make an argument that it creates two poverty households because you're putting that extra parenting responsibility on the female, preventing them from reaching their full earning capacity. Right. So how is that in the best interest of the child if now we're going to guarantee, and we know by every statistical measure, if you have two parents that are below the poverty line, like high school graduation, college graduation, teen pregnancy, all this stuff goes through the roof.
Do you think that, we talked about the judges earlier, mentioned that they're not educated in Title IV, right? Do you think that if we educated them in Title IV, like I did in my case, actually, my ex's attorney brought up the fact that I know what Title IV is, and they almost took offense to that. Like, it seemed like the more I knew about the law and what was really happening, the more I was abused. Do you think these courts and these judges, do you think it's a lack of education, or do you think it's completely on purpose? I mean, how many of these state judges know that the more child support that they assign, the more money can go into their pocket?
I think it depends on where you're at in the country. I think that the level of sophistication of family court judges, where maybe in somewhere like Chicago, I went to law school in Chicago, there's all sorts of issues with the entire court system in Chicago, and it's pay for play in pretty much any courtroom. And you compare that to maybe a more rural county where the judgeships aren't as sought after. So I think that's different. I'll tell a little kind of anecdote on judges and being educated on some of these issues that we champion. I was down in Orlando at the American Bar Association's Family Law Conference this past fall. And I don't even want to say her name. Her study's been discredited, everything by everyone, and she's basically put her tail between her legs. But at the end of her presentation, a judge stood up and commented on it. And the judge was from Atlanta, Georgia. And she's like, I can't ever rule on parental alienation. I can't ever rule on anything to do with being financially driven because the information never gets provided to me. She said she'd been a judge for 10 years and not one person had come in and presented evidence or presented information on parental alienation for her. So I think in your case, presenting that evidence, presenting that information to the judge, they may take offense to it, but at the end of the day, we're going to be educating them and at least opening the door and opening their eyes to what's going on if they're not already aware.
Yeah, and I noticed that Leslie had popped on. She popped back off, so we'll see if we can get her back on. Ted, one of the things that I want to chat with you about is I saw it in the comments a few times, and you have plenty of experience with this, as probably do all of you. But case law. Let's talk about how often and what case law is ignored by the courts. You're pleading a case. You present case law. I've done it myself personally in my pro se representation. And the judge ignored it. Is case law law? Can the judge use discretion against case law?
Well, I mean, that's hard for me to answer that because I won an appeal. I had that's called the law of the case. I mean, and so in my case, the appellate opinion was the law of my case, and the presiding judge of the Cook County Domestic Relations Division is now the judge in my case. She inserted herself as a judge in my case. So, approximately 5.5 million people in Cook County. The chief judge is now my judge, and she just wrote an order that completely ignored the appellate case in my case, the findings that they made, and so she made a comment that Judge Carr didn't grant me any parenting time in the judgment, but she didn't say that the appellate court vacated the judgment because he didn't give me any parenting time. He didn't resolve the issue of parenting time. He punted it. So that's an example of the presiding judge of a major county ignoring the law. So if you look at that, and you say, well, if they're going to ignore something as flagrant as that, what else are they ignoring? There's this case in Illinois that I always cite, and other attorneys cite it as well. It's called Suriano versus Lefebvre, which everyone in every other jurisdiction has heard of in some other form, which states that a judge does not have jurisdiction to issue an order without a motion pending. So what we have is they're called quote unquote sua sponte orders entered all the time. There was a famous one in Cook County a few months ago where a judge took away custody from a woman because she wasn't quote unquote vaccinated. She didn't get her shots, and the judge took away custody without a motion pending. That is totally illegal. And by the way, I think judges are not immune from suits in equity to have those orders vacated either in a state or federal court. But that is the most egregious example. But if you want to go down all the lists, I mean, the most frequently violated law is the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, the substantive due process clause that grants familial association as a fundamental right, even recognizing the Ninth Amendment, which, I mean, for anyone that follows the Constitution, that's rare to even have these fundamental parenting rights enshrined in the Ninth Amendment. But the 14th Amendment, where parents are presumed fit and to act in the best interest of their children, is broken all the time. There is no presumption of fitness before these judges, and they don't understand judicial restraint. The other thing that we see in Cook County is what I see is they basically, and I've seen this in Lake County, which is north of Cook County as well, in Cash's case, where the attorneys will come in, hey, Ted, this is how we do things here. That's how, you have one of those conversations. Oh, we're never going to have audio recordings in these courtrooms. Okay. So we just don't do that here. I've had those conversations. The unconstitutional customs and practices, usages, where these people just basically make up their own rules that are all totally illegal, that are unwritten. So you can't find them written in anywhere because, of course, if they were, they'd be illegal. But what you have is these these practices that are absolutely begging for a class action suit to enjoin multiple counties and jurisdictions from doing that kind of thing. So the law is broken. And I had, in my own case, I mean, part of the reason why I sort of knew that I didn't need my own attorney is that my old attorneys came to me and they said, Ted, just so you know, this was Heather Smith Groton, that's her name, told me this. Yep. She said, Ted, the judges break the law all the time here. Well, then what are you here for? I mean, why am I hiring you? Why aren't I hiring Connie? Why aren't I hiring Melissa or Mark or Ben or Leslie or Shawn, who will actually stand up to these people? If you have an attorney that's telling you that, you got to show them the door right away. Give them the pink slip. And because if you can't have an attorney that's going to make the judges follow the law, why do you have an attorney?
Right. What's the point? You might as well go to do that yourself and just roll the dice. So Ted, tell us a little bit about what's going on as far as I want to talk a little bit about domestic violence because it was mentioned in the chat. And when Leslie, we keep losing signal with Leslie, but if she comes back on, we'll bring her on next. But a lot of people are saying that the default 50-50 is bad because there are certain cases where 50-50 is unsafe. What is our answer? And I'm sure we all have the same answer, but I'm going to let you answer this, Ted. What is our answer?
I have a good one with it.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, sure. The people that tell you that this system as it is so wonderful, where you have these corrupt guardian and life child representatives who come, I mean, I could go forever in Cook County. And we'll trust the judges. The judges these are brilliant judges. They'll make the right decision. That I don't buy that. I'm sorry. And I'm sorry, Chris, can you ask me again where you were? I lost you.
Everyone, your domestic violence groups are always advocating against.
Right. Okay. So the answer to 50 a presumption of 50-50 shared parenting is that under the current system we have, mostly fathers aren't even getting hearings. And this is when these cases just start. And Mark and others know very well that how a case starts in the beginning is how a case is likely going to finish. Is that once they start doing something, it's very hard to get them to stop. So what happens often in these temporary orders is there's just an order entered, not often with agreement, where let's say the father gets like 6 hours a week, and it's impossible to change that. And there was no hearing, there was no due process. So the people that are saying that this system is working so well, you just go back to them and say, all right, I've got 20 people here. I've got case numbers. I've got everyone that you can look at these case files and you can see that these people had temporary custody orders entered without a hearing.
Right.
So the system right now in most jurisdictions is so overloaded, the caseloads are so overloaded that the courts don't have the bandwidth to be able to sort out these issues. So what we have is basically, favorite attorneys going to their favorite judges, getting personal favors or brokering deals with each other in order to determine the lives of parents and children and string out their cases and take all their money. So the domestic violence industry, I don't think really plays into this, although they've fought against the presumption of 50-50 shared parenting. It shouldn't be hard to rebut their arguments by saying, which is the case, that all of we're not mandating 50-50 final judgments. We're mandating a presumption of 50-50, a presumption of fitness throughout the prejudgment phase. And that if there's a trial and it's contested, and if someone wants to present their evidence and make a claim that another parent is unfit, then maybe there won't be 50-50. But going forward, to reduce conflict and get settlements, I think was what Ben said. That is the best way to go by far. It is the most friendly. And by the way, and I bet you no one else, I would challenge anyone here who has ever seen a judge or an attorney argue what the best interest of the child is as reflected in the financial health and well-being of their parents. That what is the best interest of their children, that their college savings goes to the guardian ad litem? Is it in the best interest of the children that the father can't afford his rent payments and is getting evicted? I've never ever seen a court decide any matters with that as a factor. That at a minimum, the financial health of the parents should statutorily be a factor in the best interest of the child standard. There's 17 already in Illinois. We could use one more. Oh
yeah, absolutely. We're gonna try and bring Leslie on. Leslie, how are you doing?
Hey, good. Sorry, I had one panhandle for a hearing today, and then I had to land back to Orlando, and my flight just landed, so that's why I'm late. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're fine. If we lose you while you're traveling, just to let you know, just because it's spotty, so.
Can you repeat that? Sorry, Chris, I'm having a bad connection. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, with the live feed, that traveling makes it a little difficult to keep a mainstream of you and your audio and stuff going. So we might have to.
I can hear you.
Okay. All right, Leslie, tell us a little about. We've sort of talked about child support. We've talked about domestic violence. We've talked about legislation a little bit. We've talked about one of the questions that I've asked every attorney here, and they've all had the same answer. Are the family courts stealing our children? And I'd love you to just answer that, yes or no.
Well, I think it's a very complex situation. And I think law in general is extremely complex because what might appear as basic to one person, somebody who has extensively studied in a certain area of case law, it might just be that more complex. I believe that you're fighting battles every step of the way, and if you don't fight those, for instance, I spent an entire day researching case law on due process violations of walking into evidentiary hearing and being ambushed by a witness that was undisclosed and being handed exhibits for the first time that were undisclosed. That right there might not seem like it has a thing to do with the issue, but there's every single step of the way you have to be prepared to fight your position. And a lot of times people will take something for granted. They'll show up in an evidentiary hearing and they don't realize they should have had notice. They should have had the opportunity to depose somebody because they formulate a cross-examination with a specific strategy. It's very complex. And if someone misses these steps, it can be detrimental to the outcome in their case. So, that's why I feel that, and then you've got judges that, they just came on the best. You don't know their history. They didn't get voted as judge because they were the best attorney in the world. They got voted. Usually, if you're a really good attorney and you're making, say you're really good and you're making all this money, you're taking a pay cut to become a judge, right? Because most judges, at least in my area, they make around $120,000. So if you're an attorney that's making $250,000, why do you want to become a judge? I'm just saying. So you're not getting the best attorneys necessarily as judges, and they will, they might not know the case law. The attorney has to bring out the case law and present it. What upsets me is when I go into a courtroom and I have clear case law for the district of the county that I'm in, and a judge completely goes against that. That's where I have a huge problem. And I've recently been bringing on an appellate attorney in all my hearings because I can't threaten a judge I'm going to appeal their decision, but I certainly can make a statement by having an appellate attorney in all of my hearings, letting them know if you don't follow the case law, guess what, we're appealing. So, as far as the family law system, it depends on what angle you're trying to analyze it from. So, I think what irritates me, and I got into a situation with not a guardian ad litem, but a parental coordinator that was going to testify, is she was trying to tell my client oh, you haven't seen much of your kids, so it would be detrimental for me to give testimony that your kids should just all of a sudden go to you 50-50. And I said, this is ludicrous. I said, I can understand if a parent has been deemed an abuser, that is really, that is chapter 39, sex offender that's been, found. But just because they haven't seen their parent, frequently you're not going to recommend a 50-50 because that would be detrimental to the child to go from little time sharing to 50-50. Those are the things that irritate me, and that really comes down to what judge is sitting on your case. I take cases all over the state of Florida, so I'm in front of judges from every walk of life, every county, and I can tell you they're all different, and it's a luck of the draw who's going to be presiding over your case. I don't know if that answers the question, but
yeah, and I'm gonna segue over to Shawn a little bit. Shawn, if you want to sort of respond to this, Leslie, my question was simple. Was, are the courts stealing our kids? And Leslie sort of went into, Shawn, you need to unmute yourself. I can't unmute you. Leslie went into the complications of law, and she's right. She said it depends on this, it depends on that. And we sort of talked about earlier, one of you mentioned, and my attorneys have said these words to me, was, I hope we get this judge, or I don't know if this judge is the best for our case. Let's talk a little bit about how, sort of what Leslie said and what we talked about earlier, which is, why are we debating, or why is it complicated? It's complicated because it was designed to be that way. It's because you have human beings that are in there breaking the black and white law. They're not following law that attorneys may present, whether it be case law and stuff like that. So they're bringing their bias and their personalities into the courtroom. Is that the problem? Is that where it's quote unquote complicated, like Leslie said? And I'm gonna go ahead and let you just sort of, if you need me to elaborate any more, which I don't, go ahead and if you want to answer that.
So your question is about bias from judges and them not following the law because of it.
Yeah, I mean, Leslie's comment was, well, it can be complicated.
Well, so let me. Okay, so here, I think I have a couple of ways to tackle that. So first of all, when you're a little kid and you decide, you really want to be a lawyer, maybe you want to be a judge, and you think that you're gonna, walk up that ladder and, someday be a, federal judge, or, going to be a justice on the Supreme Court, or you're just going to be a judge. Nobody fantasizes about being a family law judge.
Right.
You think maybe you'll be a criminal judge, right? Or, you'll be deciding important issues, but you don't think that you want to handle the squabble between these adults. Judge Judy says, right? And not to knock Judge Judy, all right, but Judge Judy, had 40 or 50 years of experience in the courtroom before she went off and started a television show. All right. And she said that, that family law judges are, by and large idiots. And I think that was a little bit unfair, because, there are some family law judges that are, anything but that, and that actually do care. But the reality is that judges often get, when they wind up on the bench on the civil side, they often get started in family law. And, they hate these people. Right. I could be married to, Leslie or Melissa or, Mark,
Me.
not you, Ted.
Not you, Ted, not you.
Right. And wind up, going in and getting a divorce because, Mark just snores like you wouldn't believe, and he won't put the toilet seat down. Right.
Ever.
And, judges hate these people, and they hate these arguments. So, and then they wind up with family law attorneys. Now, coming at family law from a different area of law in personal injury, when you litigate something in personal injury, it's really, really grounded in law. I mean, it's every sentence has a citation after it that's grounded in law. Otherwise, you're not going to get an emotion through. It's not, nothing's going to happen. And then you wind up in family law, and you look at these motions that these crappy attorneys put forward, and there's absolutely no law in them. Nothing. You're like, where the is the law? All right. And it's like, there isn't any law. It's all emotion. It's all, I'm going to fill my hair up with Aquanet and set it on fire and make a spectacle of myself. Right. Yep. And I'm going to get what I want, because what do? I say the child's in danger, fear. You've got to act to protect these people. Someone's going to wind up dead, blah, 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 blah. No law. When you actually get a judge and you get a judge who pays attention to case law, and the attorney brings forward case law, and then they, hammer on case law, then sometimes you will see things actually happen. I just had that happen in a case that I had, where I argued jurisdiction in a family law case, which is very, very law and fact intensive. And I actually had the judges paying attention to that. Your thing about biases, the reality is every single one of us is biased, right? And our biases change every day. They change based upon our experiences in life, right? I am now biased from, people who say that they are, victims of domestic violence and don't have any evidence. I don't believe them anymore. Right? That's a bias and prejudice that I have based upon my personal experience of going through this process.
Not a bias. I would say it's a healthy skepticism.
No, but it's definitely a bias. I mean, it is definitely a bias. When someone says I'm a victim of domestic violence and they don't have a photograph where they got beat to crap, right? I'm just like, yeah, you're full of crap. I don't believe you. And it's because of my experience. My point is that everybody has a bias when they're on that bench. But the problem with judges often like to believe that they don't have any bias, right? So, they're fair and impartial, and that, their biases about the way they see the world never affect anything. We talked once about on I think when I was on Mark's show, about how family law itself and the way it looks at how the family dynamic should be after divorce is extraordinarily classist. It's extraordinarily very upper middle class, rich people. It's very, very white. And these are biases. These are cultural biases that are built into it. The idea that a child should never be spanked. That's a very white thing. People of color have to pay attention to that. In colored communities, it's far more prevalent and far more acceptable than it is in white communities now. But that mentality is now dominating all of family law, and there is no acceptance that there are people who have different perspectives on it. Co-sleeping, another issue. Humans have been sleeping together with each other for millions of years. The idea suddenly that co-sleeping is a bad thing. The idea that every kid needs to be raised in a household in which they can save for college and send them all the way to college. That every parent should be able to just drop a couple $1,000s at the whim of a judge. These are biases that are built into the system.
Well, like you said, the court or the judge and or the demographic or the location or the state is allowed to tell us how we need to raise our kids. Like it's their preference. Like maybe we're not rich, but they get to say, well, you should be rich. So since you're not, we're going to take your kids. But here's the thing that I never understood is, until you separate from the person that you've had kids with, you're allowed to be poor. You're allowed to let your kids play near a main street. I've driven through neighborhoods where there may be a single mom in the house. I don't know. It could be two parents, but they're in a very rough neighborhood. It's very dangerous. These kids are very young. They're playing out in the street. And I go to myself, oh wow, it's pretty dangerous for you to be out here. Like I drove to the neighborhood, and I'm like, oh, like I better, roll my window up and whatnot. But until you go into a court, these courts don't care about those kids. They don't care about the well-being of any of those kids until there's a custody battle. So it seems like they only put all these expectations about, like you said, oh, well, each kid, can you not provide, let's say you live at your mom's house because I'm just speaking for me. We'll use me as an example. Let's say you're staying at your mom and your dad's now because you're paying $1,000 a month or $800 a month in child support. So that money that you're using in child support could be your rent, right? So in the meantime, while you have 50-50, or I'm sorry, every other weekend, you decide you have to pay to live somewhere else. And so your kids and you stay at that house. But then what my attorneys have said to me in the past is that looks bad. You don't look like you can take care of your kids. But meanwhile, I'm sending money over to somebody who's not working, right? $800 a month, who isn't working, who has broken all of her cars. They have one car in a 2-income household, and that's okay, right? As long as I pay that child support, because then we talk about that Title IV incentive stuff. But all of these things, like you just mentioned, well, you can't shower together, and they can't sleep in the same room. They're 5 years apart in age. They need to have separate rooms. CPS comes in your house and they let me see what kind of food is in your cabinet, right? Is it macaroni and cheese?
Biases. Those are absolutely biases. Yeah. And think about this for a minute. Think about, who signs up to be a GAL? Who are the volunteer GALs? Who are the people who do that sort of work? Well, often what they are is rich, retired white women. Yeah. that bring their own perspective on, how children should be raised into the environment, and then they prejudge the people who are raising their children in a slightly different way. We've got a case here in Washington. It's a great case. It's actually the guy is an Indian immigrant, and he was actually an attorney. It's called Chandola, and the Court of Appeals eventually breaks down and discusses that part of the issues that are going on in the case are simply cultural differences about how to raise a kid, and he still got screwed over.
Hey, let me hop in here. Let me hop in here. Ahead. Can you put Corey Wright's comment up on the screen here?
Is it racial biases too?
Yeah. Yes. So one thing that I've I guess I've been on a little bit. My kids are mixed. My kids are part Hispanic, part Black. And there was, and I wish I could off the top of my head remember it, but there is a study that showed, and it's always sketchy in family court with numbers because everything's so private, but African American men were up to 3 times as likely to lose all contact with their children via the court system. And if you look at it, and this is the way I justify that this probably has to be right, we know for a fact, there's study after study that shows the darker your skin color, the longer your prison sentence is in criminal court. Right. We have the same studies in employment law, where we have the hard data that shows that the darker your skin, the worse you're treated in a court of law. And Shawn makes a great point. It's predominantly white. It's especially a lot of the therapists, CPS, guardians ad litem, they're going to be older, predominantly white women. And so you can't tell me that the board has even shifted further away from equality for men of color, because everything we see in all other areas of law point to we still have a huge, whether it be explicit or implicit bias issue. And right. We just happen to keep everything private. Like, I'm a big proponent. There's no way states don't have the ability to have a system where literally there's a judge's scorecard. Like, what do they order in the initial hearing? Like, when we go in front of a judge, it's like, okay, well, they order the every other weekend. It's 30% to dad and 70% to mom. And that's predominantly what they do. because I think if we had stuff like that and you had racial profiles, I honestly think you would see a big shift even between a white man and say an African American man, and a lot of that may be just my opinion, but everything points in that direction. And on top of that, like I would say, like my client, I'm in Southern California, so very diverse client base, probably 1/3 Black, 1/3 Hispanic, 1/3 white. And on top of these men of color facing these issues, there is also a very strong, perverse cultural norm that we see with African American families, and somewhat, I think, pretty just as strong in Hispanic families, where it's mom knows best, that we don't necessarily see as strong in white families. And that may just be my perspective on things, but I feel pretty strongly that that's another angle that probably needs to be addressed, that this is another issue that men of color face that they shouldn't have to.
But the most insidious piece of that puzzle is that the judges don't recognize that bias. They don't recognize they've got that bias.
So there was a study that was published by the ABA, it was last year, and they looked at the different biases of the courts. Now, the most biased population, this is my best recollection, were the older white male judges. That was the biggest disparity in rulings of incarceration rates for Black men versus white men, things of that nature. The most fair judges were the Black females. It didn't matter who you were. It didn't matter if you were Black, white, male, female. Your prison sentences for similar crimes were about the same. So it was a really interesting study. I'm going to go back and find it, and I can email it to everybody. But it broke everything down, and the most biased, again, were the white, older male judges. The most fair judges were the Black females. Now, I practiced a lot in Montgomery County in Alabama. All three, in Alabama and Montgomery County, we have separate domestic relations judges. So there's judges that handle the med-mal cases and personal injury cases. But then there's 3 judges who do nothing but domestic relations. All 3 Black judges. I can honestly say that I don't get any different rulings out of the judges based upon if my client is Black or white or Hispanic. And for the I would say 2 out of the 3 judges, I would say 100% of the time are fair. One of the judges kind of depends on whose opposing counsel is at times, right? So we have a relatively fair county up here in Montgomery. But so I really think, and I've said this, and I hate to break anything down by race and by gender, but stats don't lie, right? They are what they are. Well, sometimes they do, but in this case, they don't. I have had the most problem with older white male judges. I've had some judges say, Miss Isaac, it's very honorable what you're trying to do, but I just don't do that. I've never prescribed to that. I think kids need to be with their moms. Well, I'm glad you said that on the record, because you can't say that, right? That's not administration. But thank you for saying that on the record, anyway. And then going back to, talking about the disparity in income, I grew up in a trailer park before we graduated into, public housing. And I lived in North Dakota. Well, there's not a huge Black population up in North Dakota. So really, you saw the disparate impact based upon socioeconomics. But nobody thought at that time, well, hey, their dad, he's got a stable job. He's, relatively middle class. He can provide. The focus was always, what can we do to supplement this poor little single mother who refuses to work even, despite she has the ability to, and obviously doesn't feed the kids. But how can we help her out? So, it seems like history, the pendulum in family court swings from one extreme and then it swings to the other extreme, because we can go way far back when women didn't get custody at all. And then the pendulum swung during the feminist movement to the other side where a dad couldn't get a fair shake in court. And all we're trying to do is get the pendulum to land somewhere in the middle, right? And it's an act of Congress to do that. But I'm going to find that study and I'll send it out. It was very interesting. But the disparity still exists, but it seems to be getting better. And also, we have a generation of younger judges now taking the bench who grew up fatherless or who grew up seeing the disparity or living in that and being educated to, equality. It doesn't matter if you're male or female, right? So, the military, I don't know about the Navy, if the Navy does this, Shawn, but like the Army is saying, hey, look, women can do everything men can do, even though like we can't. But anyway, that's what we're being told, right? So, I think we're trying to find that happy medium, and there's some attorneys that, like us, it's we're still the minority that are speaking out and saying, hey, wait a minute, yeah, you over there in the black robe, you're wrong, you're doing this wrong. So it's a matter of doing it in a way where we all have to make our record, right? We're attorneys, but it's still family court where you can stand up and kind of slam your fist and say, wait a minute now, let's use a little common sense. Here's the research. Here's what the professionals are saying, rather than going in and kissing the ring. That's what a lot of
If I may quickly, Chris.
Yeah, go ahead, Ted.
If I may quickly, the issue of bias is very interesting, and how many countries we have something like 360 countries. How many countless cultures. I had a case of a Russian. I took a Russian woman's case, Ukrainian. She immigrated, so she's American citizen, but treated horribly in Lake County, the same county as Cache, where the Russian culture has a very male domineering culture. In my case, there's in the Mexican culture, it looks a lot like the 1950s in the United States, where the men are out plowing the fields and the women are taking care of the kids and the men aren't involved. That sort of traditional culture has sort of bled in, at least into some. I mean, most I think Hispanic women have set that aside, but not all of them. And then racial prejudice against African Americans is, I mean, people in the suburbs think they have it bad. It's unbelievable, the things that we've seen. But that's just another reason why these judges should take a hands-off approach, because they'll never understand that. First of all, they've never been in the home. They have really no idea of the dynamics, and not to mention all these cultural things that they could never comprehend. Complex cultural differences that go back centuries is just another reason why these people need to take a hands-off approach and step back.
Yeah, like we said earlier, was you have criminal court judges and attorneys, and this new industry of family law was created over the last few decades, and they just sort of migrate over, and they have no expertise in the best interest of children. They know nothing about psychology. They know nothing about family dynamics. The only experience they have necessarily was how they were raised. And again, there's biases. There's, we have the Violence Against Women's Act. That's a clearly, I mean, my mother is like, that's a terrible thing to do, is just believe all women when they say something. Like, men and women, they make pieces of shit in both genders, and at almost at an equal rate. Like, there is no like men are worse, and I'm gonna let Leslie speak because she wanted to comment, and then I want to bring up one comment and have all of you address it, and then we're gonna close out the show because we're at the top of the hour of 2 hours. So Leslie, go ahead. What did you want to comment on, Leslie?
I just wanted to say, in my experience, what I see as a factor that prejudices, it's not so much the ethnicity or the culture, it's the socioeconomic position. The life group that I see that gets the most injustice, just simply because they fit into this economic mold, is your middle to low income class. Not to where you're on the low end, because then you can go and get legal aid. You usually qualify for legal aid, but when you're hitting like maybe 30,000 to like maybe 60,000, that is the life group that I think has the most injustice in our system for a multitude of reasons. I won't get into all of it because I know that time is running short, but people are forced into settlements because they can't afford to take something to trial, even though they have a great case. They can't get experts, or they're tapped out because somehow a guardian ad litem gets appointed, and they end up looking bad because they can't pay their guardian ad litem bills. I'm just, the whole point is that I have seen men take full custody over a mom. I've seen moms take full custody over a dad. I've seen African Americans take full custody over Caucasians. So I don't see the ethnicity disparity. in my cases, but I do see the disparity when it comes to income, and I think it absolutely is prejudicial to that life, that bracket of income that I just stated. So that's what I wanted to say in my experience. That's what I've experienced.
Well, Leslie, and I'll ask you first, just to sort of piggyback off what you just said, do you think that has anything to do with the fact that you're in Florida? Like, are the other states different where you get more, it's about race or ethnicity or anything like that, rather than in Florida where there's clearly, I'd say Florida's a pretty big melting pot of, ethnicity.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But money is everything in Florida. You have wealthy, middle class, poor. Is that why that's the focus in Florida, do you believe?
I would believe so, because I don't have experience in other states. But what I do want to say is, another life group that gets highly prejudiced, and you wouldn't even believe it. And I dealt with the case where I represented somebody who was worth almost $40 million. And you want to talk about being raped by the system. Everybody wanted a piece of that pie, and they purposefully kept the litigation going, kept the contention going, kept the accusations going while they kept forking bills. So that's another life group that gets prejudiced just because they have too much money. So.
Oh yeah, celebrities, athletes. You talk about Craig Ellis. I mean, these people have targets on their backs, and that goes back to when I was talking to Melissa about, should child support and all this stuff be based on income? And of course it shouldn't be. That's the stupidest metric to figure out child support. And so I'm going to ask Leslie while you're unmuted, Leslie.
Okay.
This was
and then I have to go right after this, because I just
absolutely. We're shutting the show down.
Okay.
So I want you to address this from Diana Silva. And then I'm going to let Melissa, I want the ladies to address it first. And then, gentlemen, obviously, I will let you address it, because this is an equal opportunity show. We love men and women here at We the Parents. Let's see. This was an old comment, but I wanted to save it. It's true, men want the kids because of child support. And then her comment after that, Diana, and in no way are we attacking you, but you said some dumb shit here. So I do believe I don't believe anything of what's being said based on my experience that I'm going through. Leslie, go ahead and get that.
Okay.
So I can calm down.
Everybody is looking at life through the lenses of their experience, right? That's their reality. That's why I actually did a whole study on how we went through like Greek democracy all the way, how we got to the Constitution. It's really premised on the fact that what my truth is going to be what your truth is, or it might be different from your truth. And then you've got a common person in the middle, which is the judge in these cases. I sense anger in that statement. And I'm not blaming.
She's angry.
I didn't pay for it. I did. What?
She's angry.
Okay, yeah, I sense that there's anger. And I don't know. It's hard. I can't form an opinion because I didn't walk in her shoes. I don't know what's happened. I cannot.
Well, to say that her statement was that men want custody because they don't want to pay child support. That was her statement.
Well, here's my experience. Let me talk on my experience. I am the man of my family. I am the breadwinner. I am the one who supports my family. My husband does not. He stays at home with the kids. Okay. And I couldn't imagine depriving him of a relationship of his children because he plays as important of a role as I play. And I have two sons. So I always think to myself, I might not be a man, but what's going to happen when my sons grow up and they're dealing with this? And I'm a grandparent. Yeah. Okay. So that's how I always have compassion for another gender, because I'm a mother of 4 children and 2 of those are boys. So I think to say that all men are in it for the money, that would be, I think, a little extreme and ignorant. I think that, and I'm not trying to sound like whatever, but I mean, it is. I mean, you can't say all women are this and all men are that. The right way to say it is, in my experience, what I have experienced is men, my ex wanting to have time sharing because he doesn't want to pay the child support. Right. But I can tell you right now, my husband, would absolutely fight tooth and nail to have the children. And it would have nothing to do with child support.
Exactly. So. Yeah, because I mean, half the time the men might be paying a few $100s a month, but it's going to cost them more to have custody.
Yeah.
So what an ignorant thing to say. And that's not to say that her experience is she's not dealing with, and I don't know her. She could be lying. My ex has said those things. But here's the thing. Anytime a mom or a dad says, oh, well, you just want custody because you don't want to pay child support, the other one could want the other parent not to have custody so that they can receive child support. So it works both ways, kids. It's not like, it's really, if these courts were actually...
That's where you end up screwing your kids up, because if you think these things in your head, you don't think your kid is worthy, that the father actually might love your child. I mean, you're saying that your child is just loved by another man because he wants not to pay the money. And what do you think about your own child then? I mean, I look at my children and I say my children I love them to pieces, and damn straight their dad loves them to pieces, and he would want it. I would never think my husband wants to be with my children because of money. That I would be putting my own children down. So I mean, that's I disagree with that statement. I think it's ignorant. And I sense it's coming from a place of anger. And I'm not going to make a comment because I don't know. I haven't walked in that person's shoes, but you might want to open up and talk to other men out there. And what I've noticed in life is anytime I've been ignorant, it's been slapped in my face and I've ended up living it. So I'm just saying. But anyways, guys, I have to go because I just got home and I have to say hi to everybody in my family because they're probably waiting up. So.
Congratulations on winning your case today, and enjoy the rest of the night.
It was amazing win. Amazing. But anyways, okay, I'll talk to you guys.
Hit us up in the chat and let us know how it went. Chat with us later.
Will do. All right. Bye-bye.
Melissa, what do you think about that comment that men just want custody so they don't have to pay?
Yeah, that's pure ignorance. I deal with short-sighted women all the time, and it's funny how they say, you just want custody so you don't have to pay child support, while they're asking for full child support and they're asking for all this stuff. So that's just pure ignorance. And I know, Leslie's recommendation was maybe talk to more men and see their side of it. I don't think you should talk to men until you get some therapy, until you can actually learn how to relate with these men and understand that the world doesn't revolve around you.
Right.
The world doesn't revolve around your experience. Okay. I had a horrific experience, but yet I'm still just as pro mama as I am pro dad, right? My first platform is 50-50. A shared parenting is keeping both parents involved. It's preservation of relationships. So, when you're able to step out of your own head and step into a place where you see, what, I understand how negative how detrimental these mindsets can be when you apply them to your own life, when you apply them to your family, and you apply them to society as a whole. So I have very little patience for women like that. I really do. I don't subscribe to the hashtag believe her. I don't subscribe to the hashtag me too. And when I say that, people say, oh my goodness, you don't believe women's accusations. No, I believe in evidence, and I believe in a fair process. I don't believe that allegations are evidence. They're allegations. So to come in there and say, my ex did this to me, you're all dumb. Okay, that is absurd. You need to go, I would recommend go read a book, maybe, and get some therapy, and then try to engage your children and maybe your ex in a healthy way. But don't be coming on here and criticizing everybody who works in the ditch, right? On a daily basis. Because I've said this before, we could all be doing different areas of the law and making money hand over fist, or we're not. We're in here trying to make the system better and trying to preserve relationships. So to come on and criticize us when we are saying, look, this system is broken, the system needs to change. Obviously, the system didn't work for her. So to come on here and say that, I don't have time for that ignorance.
Shawn, do men just want to see their kids? Do fathers just want to see their kids so they don't have to pay child support?
Absolutely. That of course is the answer. Fathers don't care about their children.
None of them.
As soon as they get out of the bed, they don't care at all. The only thing they really want is that good time experience, and then they're gone. Absolutely.
Right. I just want to make babies. I just want to make children, but I don't want to like take care of them.
Right. Parental love, that moment when a father holds their child in their hand, and feels their heart expand, that doesn't exist. That's a myth, right?
Yeah.
The idea that they might want to share in the responsibility of being a father after, their relationship with their ex needs to segue into some other model, that's just, that is a myth propagated by the patriarchy. That's what that is, right?
Toxic masculinity.
The idea that they might actually want their ex-wife to be able to earn, her fullest potential because she's able to, live a life of being a parent half the time and being a grown-up the other half the time, so she can actually work, so that she can actually have her career, so that she can develop as a human being. The fact that he might actually want something that's really great for his ex-wife, oh no, that's just pure sexism.
Oh, Mark.
I'm so glad you asked me my opinion.
Mark, can you be funnier than Shawn?
I don't think so, but I'll be real about it. I guess that's kind of a pun too, but not as funny as Shawn.
Funny.
But I would say that almost every situation where the woman claims that the man only wants custody to lower his child support is a situation where the primary focus of the female is maximizing child support. I have found that in 95% of the cases, when it's an issue with one parent, it's an issue with the other. That's just what I've seen. And number two is that, as we talk about, okay, the 50-50 obviously lowers or eliminates child support. Well, right now there's a study, was actually the Center for Women in Law at Georgetown University, where single white mothers make like 70 cents compared to single white fathers. It was single black mothers made like 63 cents, and single Hispanic mothers made 53 cents compared to their white male counterpart. And so, the way our system's designed right now is harming women. So, number one is usually when one cares about it, the other one also cares about it. And that's just a point of contention between the two. And the way we do things right now with paying the child support statistically is harming not just the man or whoever's paying, but is also harming the earning potential because of the extra parental responsibility.
Well, and again, if you have one parent who's, again, we talked about one who's not earning very much, and what they're doing is that redistribution of wealth, you're basically cutting the only financial resource that a child has, which you would think would be in the best interest of the child, that a parent is making good money and providing. And then you're taking it, like in my case or anyone else's case, I make more money. You're cutting my money in a third or in half. You're then giving it to her. She's either not earning very much or she's not working. So they're living sort of near the poverty line or below it with her. And now I'm having to live near or below the poverty line because I'm subsidizing her. Basically, I'm paying her like a daycare, right? And I'm not raising my kids. And I'm now financially strapped, and she's financially inadequate. And so you're taking one income and spreading it out. And now your kids don't have any opportunities. No judge can convince me that that's in the best interest of the children. Ted, do dads only want to be dads because they don't want to pay money.
Well, I don't believe so. Not in my experience. And I think I don't think that these people really understand fathers. A lot of the people in these systems understand what the motivation of fathers, that we have the same feelings as everybody else. We're hurt just as much. We have the same desires as anybody else does. We're sentimental. We can be emotional. And I think a lot of these people just have view that doesn't comport with in any time period. I don't remember Hollywood depicting fathers ever being totally disinterested in their kids at any point in history. I don't know where this idea came from.
Right. Do you think, without getting, and we may do another episode because there's a lot of subjects, and this is one of them. I'm just going to mention it just to sort of segue from what you just said. We're dealing with a fatherless generation or two, and we're dealing with the trauma from that. Daughters that are growing up fatherless. Not everybody is like Melissa, right? And comes away from being having a limited relationship with their dad, or a strained relationship, or a traumatic one, or an abusive one, or just not having their dad in their life at all. But we have a couple generations, I would say at least two, where this whole system has sort of taken root, and we're having a lot of not only fatherless boys but fatherless daughters, and these daughters are sort of, these patterns are repeating, and they're also creating, without getting too far into it, but Ted, I'll let you talk on it for a little bit before we get off, is personality disorders. And you've sort of done a lot of research, as probably many of you have done, on different types of effects of fatherlessness and trauma, trauma being the main key that causes either narcissistic, borderline, sociopath, anxiety disorders, depression. When we get into all of that, these unhealthy human beings. Ted, talk a little bit about that before we get off the show.
I'll just say something briefly, because I talked a little bit. I talked about. I think I talked about it with Mark a little bit on his show. But I think the biggest problem that judges make is they confuse hate with lack of empathy. And in high conflict cases, they'll see two people that hate each other and say, "Oh, you two hate each other." And I've had women on the stand, multiple, and I asked them the magic question: Do you hate this person? Do you hate this man? And they always deny it, which sort of takes away. It's a wonderful question, because no matter what they answer, it's going to be a bad answer for them. If they say no, it's well, then why are you acting this way? And if they say yes, well, then get over it and move on. But when these women, and maybe there'll be some men, but men are usually narcissistic, but the borderline personality of the woman, they'll tell the truth, and these judges don't know when this congenital liar, is finally telling the truth, and that's what they're doing, is that they feel nothing. Why are they acting this way? Why are they so pathological? Because the EKG monitor is flat. They're flatline. They have no feelings whatsoever. And people, if you haven't been through this, because I know you've been through this, Chris, and I know others have, and Melissa, probably growing up, a little bit of experience with that. If you haven't experienced that, and you're a judge or an attorney, you better start listening. And let us educate you what it's like to deal with that type of personality, because we're actually telling you something and you're not listening.
Yeah. And that's a good topic. If we, I want to go back and listen to this show, because it's hard to pay attention to everything while you're trying to sort of produce it and read comments and all that stuff. And, but I want to go back and listen to the show and see what we touched on, because we touched on a lot. But that whole personality disorder issue and trauma and, family history, how come courts don't ask things like, they ask how much money you make, but they don't ask you, what was your upbringing like? Are your parents divorced? Were you fatherless? Were you motherless? Where did you grow up? How did you grow up? You have these siblings. These are all the things that determine people's character, their personality, their mental health, their physical health, their financial health. These are the kind of questions we should be asking, and it shouldn't be by a judge or attorney. It should be through like legitimate psychologists, legitimate counselors,
outside
and
of the court system, outside an adversarial process where one side is going to distort, the other person's background. It doesn't belong. These cases have to go out, and the sooner these jurisdictions get these cases out and realize that the adversarial system is making this problem worse, until they do that, we're just going to keep going through this, and we're all going to be making enemies with how many people, and it's going to be fighting everyone. That's what these cases involve, and that's why attorneys like Shawn and Melissa and Mark and Leslie and Ben are such a dime dozen, or not dime. Sorry, forget it.
They're needles.
Diamond in the rough. They're not a diamond.
We knew what you meant. Not a dime a dozen. Diamond in the rough.
Yeah, they're a diamond. The reason why they're a diamond in the rough, because no one will do it. Because how many times has everyone here had clients come to them and say, no one will take my case because this is such a shit show, and I'm going to put 25 cents into the jar. Why? How many people have had clients come? You're my last resort. You're the only person that will represent me. You're the only person that I will trust. Well, for good reason, because no one else gives a shit. There's another 25 cents, and and we're the only ones who care.
I do want to do another episode, and we can talk about it later, but I do want to sign off because it's late and you guys are so gangster being on here for 2.5 hours. I want to give each of you 2 minutes to say whatever the hell you want to say. Shawn, go ahead. First, buddy. Ted's done. Ted's out. Guys, Ted Bush, thank you so much, brother.
Boy,
Shawn, what you got?
2 minutes to say whatever I want to say.
2 minutes to say whatever you want to say, man.
Well, okay, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug protesting in front of your the largest courthouse that you can get to on Parental Alienation Day,
April 25th.
Right, 9 a.m.
2022.
Take some time off from work, whatever. If you're listening to this, get your pretty little butt in front of a courtroom and protest. I'm going to be in front of King County Superior Court with a 9-foot-tall inflatable Santa holding a sign that says, Santa says parental alienation is child abuse.
Oh, that's genius. I think I'm going to get a dinosaur suit.
Isn't it? I've got a dinosaur suit you can borrow. Okay. So I'm
Chris,
literally anything you
Chris,
can do.
I'm going to get my time back.
Go ahead, Ted.
Shawn is going to be before a judge in King County tomorrow, and he's been going through 2.5 years of utter bullshit.
Yeah.
And it better come to an end tomorrow, because I don't know if they're watching this. They're probably going to clip his sarcastic point and play it before the judge tomorrow. But let those people out there in King County be aware that we've been watching this, and this is a disgrace. Everyone knows that Shawn's a big teddy bear, and putting him through this is outrageous. So they better get their act together, and if they don't, we're watching.
Yep.
Well, thanks, Ted. That's very kind. That's very kind.
Now that Ted interrupted you, Shawn, did you have anything else to say?
Well, I mean, that's it. I think that anyone who's listening to this, if you're listening to this, it's because you're living through something horrible, or because you are a professional, or you're interested in this issue. And the idea that parental alienation isn't real, that it doesn't happen, you can't deny the behavior. And there's like 1,500 cases across the country that nail down that parental alienation is real. And those people who are denying it are simply engaging in science denial. So, the only way it's going to change is by, exposing it and getting out there and talking about it. And, talking about, how screwed up the family court system is, and, coalescing behind that. So, that's what I want to say. And I want to say thanks for, putting together a group of us and meeting you. And I've enjoyed getting to know, all of you. And, I'd like to get to know all of you better, except for Melissa, because, go Navy.
Yeah. Melissa, do you want to respond to that?
Well, I mean, I would have joined the Navy, but I really felt like I, had a little more. I really felt that my masculine side was bigger than my feminine side. So I really felt that I should, go Navy. If I was more in touch with my feminine side, I might have gone Navy. But
that makes sense.
But that said, in my 2 minutes, I would say contact your legislators, and I always say that. And then, one thing that the legislators tell us is, we're not really hearing the stories that you're telling us. And so I tell my clients, call the legislators. And it's difficult because when there's rallies, when there's things going on, the clients will say, you just let me know when and where and I'll be there. And then they don't show up. So, don't stop putting pressure on the glass. Enough pressure, the glass is going to break. Because I can tell you, I graduated law school about 15 years ago. There was nothing. There were no groups. There was no podcast. There was no nothing. So there is so much more now. And the states are starting to crack under the pressure and laws are getting passed. So don't constantly never stop learning, never stop going forward. You might trip and stumble, but keep going forward. And I believe that. I mean, of all the laws that have been passed, and Texas is doing great, and we keep the pressure on, keep moving forward.
Melissa, real quick, you mentioned this in our last episode too, but you keep talking about moving forward, and I mentioned being relentless. And one of the key things that you brought up was self-care. So just elaborate on that a little bit before we sign off.
So many of my clients, I see this to where there's severe weight loss, there's severe weight gain. They start getting written up at work. They're not sleeping. They're not eating. Men don't take care of themselves when they're going through these stressful situations. Women tend to have peer groups, and women feel really free to disclose the stress in their life. And but men don't do that. Men have to be strong. Men have to always keep it together. And so self-care is extremely important. I wish I could tell you, go get therapy, but the therapists are pretty much crap for the most part. But there are a lot of groups, Chris has a show. Mark has a show. You can get inspired just by watching Ted Bush. I mean, I watched Ted in his hearings, in his individual case, and I'm like cheering. I'm like, yeah, tell him. So there's a lot of resources out there where you can connect. You can connect with them without even interacting. But I know the people will interact with you, but you can get inspired just by watching other people. But take care of yourself, really. It's not selfish. You have to take care of yourself. You're going to get out this on the other side as unscathed as possible.
Thank you for that. Mark, what you got? You need to unmute yourself if you're going to move your mouth back like that, buddy.
Yeah, it's like you're making me go last to finish it up here. But I want to piggyback off what Melissa said. Last I heard, we were going to have 13 states have 50-50 bills in state legislatures this year. Also piggybacking off of Shawn, I mean, our legislators just need to hear about this. This has went from being a fringe movement to, in the next 2 to 5 years, it's going to be one of the hot button political issues in our country. The science is just overwhelming at this point. And the best thing you can do right now is to educate yourself and tell your story to any person of influence that'll listen. Whether that's the mayor, somebody on the city council, your state representative, you'd be amazed at how easy those people are to get a hold of. And continue to educate yourself, because this is coming to a head. 6 states last year changed their laws. We got 13 in states this year. It's only going to get bigger. And that's really the viewers here. I mean, if they're in 2.5 hours in, you guys are really the ones. You guys are the engines driving this. We get to sit up here and people know our faces and people follow our social media accounts. But the people who call their state representatives, the people who have the conversations with their friends and their neighbors about what happens. That's what's made this snowball get bigger as it's rolled downhill, is more awareness. So I want to thank everybody for watching. Chris, you've been trying for like 5 months to make this happen.
It turns out
getting 7 attorneys to have the same night free is next to impossible. But you pulled it off. So thank you for everything you've done. And it was awesome sharing the virtual stage with my fellow attorneys.
Yeah. So Diana asked, is North Carolina one of those, what is it, 13 states you said, 16 states, 15 states?
13 was the last I had.
Yeah. So North Carolina is the state that I'm in. So we have a shared parenting bill that was sort of put in place. But again, it's sort of judge's discretion trumps it. So it's garbage. And I'm working with my legislators as well as others. If I have to run for governor, I will be doing that in 2024. Trust me. But hopefully I get 50-50. And guys, hey, anyone out there that does get 50-50, or you do get more time with your kids, and you're, you've been in this movement or you've been following us, just because your case is settled, don't leave us. Like, keep fighting, because it's going to be the next generation too. So I think, a lot of us sort of bow out of the movement, maybe once our case is settled, because who really wants to keep doing this when you've been doing it so long? You're exhausted. So, there's a few of us who have stayed in it, and I want to thank them that even though they got 50-50, they continue to advocate, and they go to legislators like Melissa said, and they keep pushing to the same degree. So, guys, I want to thank you all so much. It is late. We did 2.5 hours. I do want to do a follow-up episode because I think there's a few more subjects we could talk about. And I may bring in a clinical psychologist, and I may bring in maybe a CPS worker or a child support agent. Let's see what we can put together for a second episode of the attorneys. And I think that might spark a cool discussion. Guys, thank you so much. Have a great night. God bless you. Talk to you later. And guys, everyone in the audience, have a great night. Share this episode, please. Thank you so much. Good night.